All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back, and it is really good to be back after a brief hiatus here. Really just got back from about a 6-day bender and had such a blast down in Austin, Texas for my bachelor party. Got back, put the power rankings up, drove down 5 hours to Lambeau Field, went to the Monday night game, and then drove another hour south because the Ryder Cup is an hour away from Lambeau right now. So got to go to the practice rounds there. Super cool. Whistling Straits, beautiful golf course in its own unique way. And then slept overnight, came back up, and now it's been like trying to catch up with all of the action. The NFL moves so fast, but it really was good for me to just, get some time to take a step back and hang out with friends and relax. And I feel like after the deep dive series, I was really feeling pretty swamped. So it's been good to get back and kind of take a week off and refresh, and I'm feeling really excited to get back in stride here. I do want to thank you guys for your patience. Content hasn't been coming out at the schedule that I had projected when we started, but hoping to get back on course there. We're going to have Studs and Duds starting up next week, which is going to be an epic, much anticipated video. I will say a couple things before we kind of get into the show here that I've had some time to kind of reflect on and think about related to my power rankings and this weekly podcast. With the power rankings, I actually found uploading it on Monday was much more successful for my channel. It actually got a good 15-20% more views, and I don't think that has anything to do other than the fact that it was much more fresh coming out on Monday. So let me know if that would detract from the power rankings if I didn't include Monday Night Football in there, because it would actually be better for me if I could do that on Monday. And then also with this show, I really like the idea of doing a live podcast. And I know a good 20% of you really like the live version of this podcast, which this one is obviously being uploaded. But there are some issues with the live podcast. Just for one, it's a bigger strain on me. It's obviously harder to record live. I'm monitoring a chat. And also, YouTube doesn't really tell people that it's happening all the time. So I know some people like the live podcast, but I think it might actually be better to just record these offline, upload them, and then the audio version can come out at the same time. Still planning to do that at 4:30 Eastern every Wednesday. But just let me know if you're watching this on YouTube, or you want to let me know on Twitter. Let me know your kind of thoughts about those things. Just kind of doing some talking out loud, some market research, finding out what's best for myself, my channel, and you guys as a community. So I'm always enjoying those conversations about what kind of content you guys want to see. I think it's important to work with you guys on that stuff. So just a little bit of a tangent there. Some things I've been thinking about. You guys can let me know. And then before we start the show here, I want to tell you guys about my friends at MagicSpoon.com. So Magic Spoon has figured out how to create the cereal tastes of old, some of my favorite peanut butter and chocolate inspired flavors of my favorite old cereals, but they do it now without the carbs, with more protein, lower in calorie, and no sugar. And it's really tasty, and it's healthy, and it's become a huge part of my daily routine. And I found out about them through another podcast, and I reached out to them and said, hey, can I represent your brand and tell my viewers about Magic Spoon? And they agreed to support the show as well. So I cannot recommend it enough for those looking for a healthy, daily, convenient option to put into your diet routine. It certainly is a big part of mine. So check out MagicSpoon.com. Use promo code FranchiseGuy. You'll save $5 on your first purchase, and you'll support my channel and this podcast as well. So go check it out. I think you guys will really like it. And now we can officially begin the Fully Inflated Football podcast this week. We're a little bit late. We're about 5 days removed from the week 2 games. So for this week, I'm not going to be doing the game by game review. I think for this week, it's best we take a little bit more of a topical approach here and open up the mailbag a little bit, just because I think the games, like I said, the NFL moves fast. I think people are ready to kind of look forward a little bit more. So we'll get back to the weekly reviews, studs and duds, all that great stuff next week. But for this show, it's still going to be a great one. I want to talk about Sam Darnold and his Thursday Night Football and really just his Panthers career, the way that started, because that's a really interesting topic right now. And then I have a topic that we're going to do called Buy 3, Hold 3, and Sell 3, where I'm going to buy, hold, and sell 9 total takes. Really, we'll explain that when we get there. And then we'll get into the mailbag. We've got, I think, 19 really good questions that are going to keep this show alive for the week. So let's go. Let's get started. Let's start and talk about Sam Darnold. It's been really fun to see just kind of overwhelming optimism and support towards Sam Darnold, who has been really flagged by, I would say, everyone, at least some aspect of a bust. And then you get into the different departments of he's completely done and can't be saved, some people in that department. And then people that were more like me, like, yeah, his career has been a bust, but the Jets have done nothing for him. And that people don't understand always how much surrounding situation matters for any quarterback, but especially a 21-year-old quarterback that had some, tendencies in his game that needed to be developed and weeded out at the next level when it comes to aggressiveness and turnover-worthy plays. That's, to go on a tangent here, that's a big part of why I think guys like Fields and Lance need more time, and maybe Zach Wilson is a guy that needed some more time as well. But anyway, back to Sam Darnold. He had been dubbed a bust, and the Panthers rolled the dice, and I gave them so much credit for this move. I was really one of the first people to come out and applaud the Panthers for this move when a lot more people, I would say, were on the pessimistic side at first. And my deal was, sure, you can nitpick if Fields would have been if they could have traded up or had confidence to go get Fields in the draft or go trade it for Lance or, whatever it may be. You can nitpick those things, but relative to their decision to not stick with Teddy Bridgewater or, go with a bridge quarterback in Andy Dalton or Fitzpatrick or bring back Cam Newton, the thing that I love about David Tepper and this organization, and I've said this about them before they went and got Sam Darnold, is they play to win the game. I don't know if this soundbite's going to come in here. Yeah, it should work.
You play to win the game.
Hello?
You don't play to just play it.
But that's what the Panthers did, man. They dared to be great, and they had the foresight to say, okay, Sam Darnold, I would bet, was their number one quarterback. That regime, that front office, loved him 3 years ago. He's only 24 years old. And they looked at what the Jets did for him and said they effed him. No O-line, terrible play calling, no playmakers, very poor defensive support for the majority of the time. Literally was setting him up to fail. And unfortunately, they're kind of doing the same thing to Zach Wilson up there in New York, it seems right now. But having the foresight to say, okay, let's rip him out, give him a new scheme, let him just remove himself from the New York Jets, and we're going to give him Joe Brady, who is going to be a head coach next year. And there's plenty of Joe Brady questions coming in through the mailbag. We're going to give him DJ Moore, who's incredible. We're going to give him Christian McCaffrey, who unfortunately got hurt this week. We're going to give him Robbie Anderson and, Terrence Marshall. We're going to load him up on receivers. Now, the offensive line doesn't look particularly good, but they at least gave him some pieces there to work with and elevate and just really allow some aspect of consistency there for Sam Darnold. And that's all he's apparently needed. Now, he hasn't been perfect, but it's been fun to see him now 3 straight 300-yard games and kind of people waking up and being like, okay, like, young player, you can salvage a guy like this who has a ton of talent. That's the thing with Sam Darnold that's different from a lot of other quarterbacks that have flamed out. He has athletic ability. He has, to me, really good pocket presence and play-making ability. He's got a super strong, natural see-ball, hit-ball arm, and just so much to work with there. His problem was really, of course, the bad throws into traffic and fumbling and trying to do too much. But that, again, comes back to him having to do so much for the New York Jets. The biggest issue in Sam Darnold's tape was the play-to-play consistency and playing in structure. But you need a structure around you to do that, especially when you're coming out of USC that they also didn't give him a lot of structure. So he's never really had an opportunity to have play calling and receivers getting open and timing as an aspect of his game. And now into 3 weeks, he looks at worst like a good NFL quarterback. Now, it hasn't been perfect. There's been missed throws. There's been some mistakes in there. He's had too many fumbles, frankly. So there's going to be aspects to work with. But if you look at Sam Darnold as a 23, 24-year-old quarterback, he's the same age as Josh Allen. I think Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. I think Mahomes is older. But you get the point. He's the same age as Joe Burrow. All these super young quarterbacks now just kind of treating him like maybe the New York Jets was his college experience. And now the Carolina Panthers is his NFL experience. And now he's going to get some momentum and it's just been fun to see him have a baseline to build off of. And with the New York Jets, there was never a baseline and any element of consistency around him, which just really expedited his issues. So it's been super fun to see. I think I've said that about 5 times, so you get the point. And I'm just happy to see Sam Darnold, who I loved coming out, just look competent and have an aspect of consistency. And I'm really excited to see where this goes, because I think he still has top 10 potential at the quarterback position. He's still got a long way to go before we can get into that conversation, but he certainly is trying to build up towards that, and I think that's really cool. So that's been fun. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Panthers here in our next section. This topic here is going to be called Buy 3, Hold 3, and Sell 3, and there's no perfect science here as to what the criteria are for these topics here, but basically these are takes that I'm going to buy 3 takes, I'm going to hold on 3 takes, kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and then I'm going to sell 3 takes, or at least teams or whatever. You'll get the point as we go here. I want to start with what I'm buying, and the number one thing I'm buying is that the Los Angeles Rams made the right decision to trade 2 first-round picks and their quarterback, Jared Goff, for Matthew Stafford. And it's been just obvious. The explosiveness and consistency and it factor that this offense has with Matthew Stafford is so much different. And I feel like we've really seen, especially in that Colts game, but just going back to the Bears game as well, there's just plays that are now available to this super talented Rams offense that weren't available with Jared Goff. And Goff has a strong arm, but he doesn't have Matthew Stafford's arm. And the throws he's been able to make down the field, just opening things up. But he also has done something Jared Goff couldn't do, and that is extend plays and give this team kind of a counterpunch when McVay and the scheme aren't working. And we've seen much better quarter-to-quarter consistency from the Rams offense. And they haven't been perfect, right? Their defense has been good, but not great. And I would say the run game has been just okay. It's probably less than they expected. So that passing game has really been carrying the Los Angeles Rams. And his chemistry with Cooper Kupp out the gate has been really fun to watch as well. Cooper Kupp might win MVP at this point with his production. But I feel very strongly that even though they gave up first-round picks and they had to eat some dead cap to make this move happen, that this really opened up the Rams' ceiling in a way that they didn't have last year. We just talked about the Panthers doing something like this. Dare to be great, and the Rams are doing that, and I think they've seen very early returns, and I can confidently say that the LA Rams made the correct decision to go and get Matthew Stafford, who is surely an MVP candidate through the first 2 weeks of the season. And then talk about MVP candidates. This is going to be my second thing that I am buying, and that is that Kyler Murray is a legitimate MVP frontrunner. And frontrunner can mean whatever you want. I would just say he's in the top 3 for MVP candidacy. Now, Kyler has not been perfect. I think he's thrown 3 interceptions, and they're all his fault, I believe. Certainly the 2 in their win against the Vikings were his fault. But when you're throwing 3 interceptions underneath about 10 unbelievable plays that a variety of them I really don't think any quarterback can make, and that includes the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jacksons of the world, it almost doesn't always matter, those interceptions. Now, those are things that he can certainly improve upon if he wants to get into like the top 5 quarterback conversation. And again, he's not a perfect player, but the plays that Kyler Murray is making, I wish I could show the highlights, because basically, if you put Aaron Rodgers' pocket presence and escapability, or Patrick Mahomes or Russell Wilson, whatever it is, and gave him something close to Lamar Jackson's athleticism, you can't really sack this guy. It comes down to that. I love how he kind of, when he looks to escape the rush, he finds he'll put his head down and he'll find an escape lane. But the second he knows and senses kind of where he needs to get out, his eyes go right back downfield. And a lot of these scrambling types of quarterbacks, they don't do that. They put their head down and then their head never comes back up. And that's not Kyler Murray. He puts his head down to escape, to pass, not escape to run. And once he gets out of the pocket, he's now pairing that ability, the escape ability and the athleticism, with one of the more natural arms in the entire NFL. And I don't know if it's because he's shorter and just his movements are much quicker, and he's more compact and has better balance. But his ability to throw off platform, he's had some, also just some back foot floating deep balls that are just, I don't know, you don't see quarterbacks doing that, where he's got a blitz coming, he doesn't have enough blockers, but he's just going to backpedal and just lob it up in a perfect spot, both times to Christian Kirk out of the slot first 2 weeks. But that's just another example of his natural arm talent, where he can literally put the ball wherever he wants, whenever he wants. He might not have a top 5 arm strength in the league, but if you want to talk about arm talent as far as the combination of strength and accuracy, it's I don't want to say unparalleled, because there's a lot of great quarterbacks, but it's up there. Like, he is legitimately dominant throwing the ball on the move. And he's kind of carrying the Cardinals' offense in a lot of ways. I don't think the play calling has been like noticeably amazing. The defense, at least last week, let up a little bit. And yeah, he is the definition of an MVP right now, where if you take Kyler Murray off of the Arizona Cardinals, I don't know if they beat the Titans. They kind of dominated that game, but they definitely don't beat the Minnesota Vikings. So with the way he's playing, with the numbers he's putting up and the highlights he's putting up, I think Kyler Murray is a legitimate MVP candidate, and to me has almost safely entered the top 10 quarterback ranking for me. Then we have our last buy take, and I, believe it or not, am buying the Las Vegas Raiders and Derek Carr. So, and John Gruden, by the way. So John Gruden, I've never really changed on this stance. I think John Gruden is a fantastic coach. I've consistently, really after his first season, where I was impressed, I've consistently ranked him amidst the top 10 coach conversation, and certainly inside the top 10 offensive coaching ranking. I think they were probably 7th or 8th, maybe 6th for my offensive coach ranking for my deep dive series. John Gruden can absolutely coach offense. Darren Waller was incredible foresight by him. I think he's good at developing offensive linemen and scheming guys open, using a guy like Hunter Renfrow. Does so many things at a high level, and his offense is incredibly balanced and uses traditional concepts but mixes in a lot of the play action and pre-snap movement and stuff that we see in modern offenses as well. I think he has adapted and done something that myself and many people weren't sure he was going to do after not coaching for so long. So John Gruden is and really has been a great offensive coach, and that has not changed. What has changed here is Derek Carr looks like a different quarterback. Honestly, I've been pretty critical of Derek Carr, but if you go back and watch what I've said about Derek Carr, it's not the accuracy, it's not his toughness or his processing or his arm strength. Like, that's never been my thing with Derek Carr. My thing with Derek Carr is he's always missed that kind of playmaking it factor about him. On third down, it was far too often like, why are you getting rid of the ball so quick? Why are you not escaping? Like, you can move, you can run. Like, get out of the pocket and go make a play. Push the ball downfield. That has always been my thing with Derek Carr, is he's always been, dare I say, a soft quarterback stylistically. Tough dude, absolutely. Can take a hit, will take on tackles. Not necessarily that, but just when it comes to like his passing and decision making has always been a little bit of a soft, timid passer. And that has not been Derek Carr this year. And that's why I say he looks like a new man. And he's balancing those things with what he already does well as far as accuracy and playing and structure and understanding the offense. So now Derek Carr is like, I don't know, a top 10 quarterback? If he is consistently getting out of the pocket, using that amazing arm talent he has, and letting guys like Ruggs and Waller and Bryan Edwards thrive as deep threats, that changes everything for this offense. So that is really what's changed here on top of the Raiders defense. I did not think this Raiders defense was going to be any good. Now, they went against a run-oriented Ravens offense and a Pittsburgh Steelers offense that's one of the worst in the NFL right now. So while I'm very impressed by the Raiders defense, I think worst case scenario, Yannick and Max Crosby are going to be much better than I thought they would be. They have discovered that Jonathan Abram is not a free safety. Credit to Gus Bradley for noticing that and not asking him to play a ton deep because that is not his strong suit. Letting him just kind of play that pursuit, tackling, strong safety role. Casey Hayward looks incredible out there. Trayvon Mullen inside this scheme looks like a very good Xavier Rhodes type of player, which was my comp for him coming out. The scheme is just so much better here, and I wasn't sure that was going to be the case with Gus Bradley, and player usage has been a problem. We mentioned Abram playing free safety, LaMarcus Joyner in the slot. They are putting their guys in the positions they should be, so credit to Gus Bradley for that as well. But the Raiders defense at least looks like it's going to be average, and if they play like they have the last 2 weeks, they could be above average. And pair that with a Raiders offense now led by a more gutsy, aggressive Derek Carr, that changes the game for the Raiders. That's not like, oh, they're a little better than I thought they'd be. That's like they're a completely different team than I was projecting. So I am buying the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't know how much I'm buying them. Like, I don't think I'm buying them as like a Super Bowl team. But 11 wins, 12 wins, I think it's possible if the defense is that good and if Derek Carr keeps playing like this. So I'm buying the Raiders. I'm sure when we get to the offseason, it's going to be more questioning their moves, and I don't think they're off. I mean, Yannick was a nice signing. That was one of the things I liked that they did. And I loved the Casey Hayward signing. Those were the two things I applauded them for. But it's not like Alex Leatherwood's been great. So, I still think their front office needs to take a serious look in the mirror, but this is a pro Raiders segment. The coaching and the quarterbacking is trending up for the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the takes that I am holding on. And this is just kind of like, there's aspects of things that I like, but I'm also like hesitant or 1 foot out on certain things. And although we credited Sam Darnold earlier, I am 1 foot in, 1 foot out on the Panthers as a playoff contender. And whenever you are negative about a team, it's important to realize the context, right? Because things are trending up for the Panthers. They have been one of the surprise teams of the season. I love Matt Rule. I'm happy for Sam Darnold. Brian Burns looks incredible. There are a lot of great things to say about the Panthers. My point here is that the hype train is officially rolling now. They're 3-0. They look like they have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And there's going to be conversations about the Panthers as a playoff team. Panthers fans might start talking about winning this division. Like, that is the direction things are going with the Panthers. And I think this is, for me at least, more of a pre-hype team. I think there's a lot of hype on them right now, and by the end of the season, where I'm holding a little bit is that I think it's likely that they ultimately end up disappointing based on the active expectations. I think they are probably a 9 or a 10-win team. I look at them maybe around the same breath as like the Cardinals last year, and we're seeing now the Cardinals this year maybe were hyped up a little bit too much last year, if that makes sense. So I think the Panthers, I'm holding on them because I love the direction they're going, but I'm not leaping in on them as a playoff team this year. Now, they could get in, they could get like a 6 or a 7 seed, But I do think the Panthers are going to encounter some lumps throughout the season, especially with Christian McCaffrey now out and J.C. Horn goes down. Really, a really costly win for them on Thursday night. And I have seen some things from Darnold where it's like, okay, he's obviously a starting caliber quarterback right now, but he's far from like a top 16, like carry the offense type of guy either. I think that offensive line really needs to be improved into next year, but I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out on the Panthers as a playoff team. I'm 2 feet in, fully in on them being a surprise team and a wild card contender and a team that is trending upwards. But now that the hype is really getting going, I'm going to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out on them being a playoff team this year. Okay, the other take that I'm holding on is that Josh Allen is regressing. This was kind of a hot topic throughout the summer because you look at Josh Allen's first 2 years and he's kind of this, bottom half starting caliber quarterback, playmaker, but makes mistakes, inaccurate. And then a lot of the conversation this summer was, okay, he has this MVP caliber season last year. Where does that in between lie? Does he regress back to the mean? Does that mean he's all the way back to like a bottom half quarterback? Or where does this sit this year? Is a 1 year wonder, or is this Josh Allen now? And I just kind of said coming into the year, I was like, Josh Allen was incredible last year, but we do need to see another year of this before we crown him as an elite quarterback. And frankly, before I would have paid him $44 million, that is a different kind of debate. I guess you got to pay a player after a year like that. So I don't know if I'll go so far in that. But there's been definitely some concerns through 2 weeks on Josh Allen and his accuracy. And I think those are legit. I mean, his accuracy down the field has never been something he's had full control of other than last year. So, again, I'm like tiptoeing around this because I know Bills fans are like, getting their pitchforks ready, like, oh no, he's taking down Josh Allen. That's really not what I'm about here, although I feel like that's what's come out of my mouth to this point. I think where Josh Allen is not going to regress all the way back to like 2019 Josh Allen is his decision-making and ability to read defenses is so much better than it was in 2019. Like, he actually plays in structure now. He doesn't make a ton of terrible decisions as far as like forcing balls into double coverage and like making bad reads. That's the part of Josh Allen's game that I do think is gone. And you pair a better processing Josh Allen with his playmaking ability, the odds of him becoming anything less than a top 10 quarterback are extremely low. But that's kind of where I'm 1 foot in on Josh Allen. Like, I still think he's a great quarterback, and I kind of regret mentioning not paying him because I know I said I would have paid him, and I would have. He is I don't see him being worse than a top 10 quarterback, and if you have that player, you pay him what he needs to be paid. So I want to walk that back a little bit. But the 1 foot out aspect of Josh Allen is the accuracy side of things. It does remind me of in Little League, like there was a pitcher that was always on my team, and he could somehow throw like an 85-mile-an-hour fastball, which at the time was just insane. But he couldn't hit the strike zone. And I think when you throw the ball as hard as he can, I think it just, I don't know. I've never had an arm that strong, so I can't explain it, but it just maybe is a little bit harder to hit the strike zone when you throw the ball that hard. So I don't know. I think the accuracy stuff with Josh Allen is definitely something to monitor because he has sprayed a lot of throws, and they were costly in week 1 against the Steelers for sure. Defense kind of carried week 2. So I'm 1 foot in on and 1 foot out on Josh Allen kind of regressing a little bit. I don't think he'll go back to 2019 Josh Allen. I don't think that guy's coming back. But if he regresses back to, I don't know, the 9th or 10th best quarterback in the league, then the Bills in turn will also probably regress. So a little bit wishy-washy on what I've seen from Josh Allen. And then I'm also holding on something that I've been incredibly optimistic about really up until this point, and that is Joe Burrow's future. And I word it like that because in a vacuum, I have no concerns about Joe Burrow. I think he's already one of the best processing quarterbacks in the league. I think his pocket presence is phenomenal. He is efficient in the short game. He extends plays. He has that it factor. I love Joe Burrow. What I don't love is pretty much everything I've seen from the Cincinnati Bengals offense, and this comes to the offensive line and from their head coach, Zach Taylor. The offensive line is a disaster. It is just as bad as the Bengals could have feared. Every 5 plays, it feels like Joe Burrow is either getting twisted and bending out of sacks or just straight up getting hit. And that was the fear last year. It got him hurt. Not only is that a risk for him to get injured again and become Carson Wentz, where his body's just getting beaten to hell, but it also it limits his processing. It doesn't just I meant to say his development. It doesn't just limit his development. It literally is a detractor from his development because it doesn't allow him to build upon the tendencies that are so good for him. Instead, he's constantly got this, devil on his shoulder where he's like, I got to get out of here. I got to make a play. I'm about to get hit in 2 seconds. It's just not healthy for a young quarterback. So that is a massive concern for me. And then the play calling and Zach Taylor, he continues to inspire no confidence, no consistency. Like what is the identity of the Cincinnati Bengals offense? Because it sure as hell is not the Shanahan, Sean McVay offense that he learned under. It is not wide zones, play action, scheming up open, easy pockets, and open receivers down the field. That couldn't be any further from the offense that we have to watch for the Bengals. Really what we end up seeing is failed running attempts followed by trotting out empty and saying, okay, go figure it out, Joe Burrow. And you're trotting out empty with 5 linemen that mostly all stink trying to protect Joe Burrow. It's been a disaster for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's so frustrating to watch. I honestly, I got through it, but there was multiple times where I wanted to turn it off against the Bears. I was like, I can't watch the Bengals ruin Joe Burrow like this. And it's a fitting week to say that, as we've now seen Sam Darnold get some better help and, look much better. And the one consolation is consolation. Yeah, that's right. Not constellation. Anyway, the one saving grace here is Joe Brady looks incredible. He's going to get a head coach offer. Zach Taylor looks fireable at the moment. Joe Brady was Joe Burrow's offensive coordinator at LSU when they lit the world on fire. And I can't think of a more obvious hire than Joe Brady to the Cincinnati Bengals to reunite with Joe Burrow in a system that really fits him well. I actually talked about both of these things in my deep dive. Number one was that was my predictions video where I said best case for the Bengals is they look okay, end up getting Joe Brady as their head coach next year. But I also talked about how the scheme, as far as outside zone, play action deep shots, scheming things open for the quarterback, making things easier on the quarterback. I talked about how that Shanahan offense is not a good pairing with Joe Burrow because Burrow, he's much more of a methodical pro-style offense guy. You don't need to simplify his reads and force him to play in structure. He's going to do that naturally. And he's also not a great deep ball thrower either. So if you had more of a West Coast spread style offense where you're reading defenses, getting rid of the ball quicker, like Joe Brady runs, voila, I think you'll see Joe Burrow take off. So I think the timing couldn't be any more perfect, and that would be a best case scenario. But I'm certainly holding on Joe Burrow's future because I think it really is in the hands of the Bengals to do the right thing, and that's very frustrating for someone like myself who just wants to see Joe Burrow succeed. Okay, now these are the takes that I'm selling. All of these are takes, so I'm not selling the take, but I'm selling the team or the player that we're going to talk about. So again, there's no science behind this, but these are 3 things that I'm selling or lower on or whatever you want to say. And the first thing I want to talk about is the future outlook for the Miami Dolphins. And I know Dolphins fans are really tired about me banging on this team, but it's it's just reached a stalling point here. And a lot of the things that I've been critical about this team for are starting to really surface. And I think a lot of Dolphins fans a lot of Dolphins fans have actually reached out to me and be like, I don't want you to think that like every Dolphins fan thinks you're crazy, because a lot of Dolphins fans actually agreed with the things I've said about the offensive line and the play calling and Tua being kind of a low upside player. But I think we're starting to get that to be a more consensus viewpoint on the Dolphins, which is something I've been saying about them. And it's been just a compounding amount of factors. You know, the offensive line it might be even worse than I thought it could be. I liked the Liam Eichenberg pick, but I also was critical of them taking Jalen Waddle and passing on Penei Sewell. But Liam Eichenberg has been a complete non-factor, dare I say, liability for them when he's been out there. We don't even know if he can play tackle. He might have to be a guard. Austin Jackson looks like he's worse than last year, and I hated that pick when they made it. I thought they took him too early, and we're making a mistake to lean on him too early. And I actually said, you can go back and go back and watch it. I said, I would not have taken Tua with the 6th overall pick because I don't think he's a quarterback with the upside to warrant that pick. I would have taken, in that situation, let's see, Andrew Thomas was off the board, so my number 2 tackle, I believe, would have been, I'd have to go back and look. I think it was Jedrick Wills. I think I went Thomas, Wills, Wirfs, Becton was my order. So I think Jedrick Wills would have been my pick at 6, and then I would have risked that I could either get Tua or Jordan Love, who was my number 2 quarterback, with that 18th pick. Or maybe I've traded up. And I think in hindsight, that would have been a much better option for this team. Because, frankly, Tua has not been a high upside player. He's had some decent moments. He's not necessarily like a super bad player, but he hasn't even proved to be a starting caliber player. The offense, it just isn't working for the Dolphins. The offensive line sucks. They have too many receivers. That's the other thing with the Waddle pick. I was like, you have enough playmakers. You just signed Will Fuller. Still got Albert Wilson there. Lynn Bowden showed some nice things. I could not believe that they traded their first-round pick to move up. So they don't have their own first-round pick. They have another team's first-round pick. They gave up an extra first-round pick to move back up and take Jalen Waddle. That was one of the worst moves of the draft, in my opinion, even if Waddle's a great player. It's just been a layering amount of moves that I just said this is not going to result in good offense for the Miami Dolphins. And their play calling situation it's timid. I don't know what their plan is here. They have 2 offensive coordinators. They're running like a gimmicky college-style RPO offense that very rarely works, top down, allowing the quarterback to even look down the field. So I want to highlight that I don't think this is all about Tua. I think the front office deserves a ton of criticism. They've whiffed on a ton of high draft picks at this point. They haven't utilized free agency well for the offensive side of the ball. I don't think the pieces they added are what they needed. Guys like Will Fuller, who's a deep threat for an offense that can't push the ball downfield. We haven't seen Will Fuller yet, so we'll see how that ages. But, as great as that defense is, and as much as I like Brian Flores, it's centered around 2 corners that are going to be 29 years old next year. They don't have too much of a pass rush. Jalen Phillips, I think, has 4 pressures in his first 2 weeks. We'll see how his career goes, but he isn't off to a great start. I'm selling the future of the Miami Dolphins. I think they'll always be an okay team because they're going to play really good defense. But, man, I can't get excited about the Dolphins when they can't move the ball on offense. So the next thing I'm selling, we're going to stay in Florida, is Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And really my take here is that he is not going to make it to the 2022 season. I think Urban Meyer retires from the Jacksonville Jaguars after this season, and they look back on this as one of the worst hires ever. I don't know. I'm prepared to go there with the Jaguars because I wanted to see what it would look like. I was certainly in the hold category on Urban Meyer this summer, but I'm selling. I'm officially selling Urban Meyer. Get him out of there. Maybe not next week. That's just going to result in turmoil. But the defense is incredibly poorly coached. The defense just, there's no way around it. It's bad. The moves that Urban Meyer decided to make were, he overpaid a bunch of dudes that just, it didn't make sense. I thought their offseason was really questionable. Obviously, it sucks that Travis Etienne got hurt, but they shouldn't have drafted a running back. Clearly, he had no understanding that James Robinson was a valuable running back for them because he's used him terribly so far. So just from a player personnel, like, this is my team, I'm going to build it how I want. I don't think Urban Meyer knows the first thing about who the good players in the NFL are and how much you should spend on those players. That's been a problem. I also think that his scheme being layered down to Darrell Bevell has been a travesty. They have done nothing to make things easier on Trevor Lawrence. Their protection games up front, the offensive linemen look lost. That's been a disaster. I don't get, like, and the other thing is the teams look flat. They don't come out like with all this energy. They're not buying into what Urban Meyer's selling, right? So if he's not a leader guy, he's not inspiring a good culture, which he very clearly is not. If he's not a personnel guy and he's not a scheme guy, what the actual frick does Urban Meyer do? And that's what I said when they hired him. It's like, okay, he can recruit in college and he has a scheme that works in college. What is he going to do in the NFL? And the answer appears to be nothing. He's also a guy that, I haven't followed his career as closely as other people, but he has stepped away from situations that weren't, I know some of it was like health related, so I don't want to like say anything insensitive here, but my point is I think he retires after this year. And again, that might be the best saving grace for Trevor Lawrence. Brian Dable, who, saved Josh Allen, go down to Jacksonville, get to work with Trevor Lawrence, cannon arm, work in that vertical offense with DJ Chark and Marvin Jones, who looks pretty good. LaVisca, like, hell yes. Brian Dable to Jacksonville, Joe Brady to Cincinnati, make it happen, make those two young quarterbacks as good as they can be. The last little take here that I'm selling is the Atlanta Falcons. I've been so unimpressed by the Atlanta Falcons. And this comes back to the Justin Fields conversation over Kyle Pitts with the number 4 pick. And for one, like, before we even talk about the offense, this defense is so bad. So bad. And watching this team, Grady Jarrett makes so many plays, and I'm like, they should get him out of there. Like, Grady Jarrett could be a just game-changing force for another team that's ready to actually win and have a good defense. Like, can you imagine if, like, the Rams somehow got him, or the Browns, or the Broncos, or the Cardinals, or, the Packers? Like, there's all these teams trying to compete. The Chiefs, maybe. I know cap space is a thing, but, like, can you imagine if you had Grady Jarrett, who's one of the more underrated superstar defensive tackles in this league, to somewhere that he's not even, like, the focal point? It would be a game changer. Because Grady, by the time the Falcons are ready to be good, Grady Jarrett's not going to be this good anymore. And he is worth multiple first-round picks with how good he plays right now. So that's my first takeaway. But other than him, this defense is so bad. They're soft and squishy up front. If Grady Jarrett isn't splitting a double team and making a TFL, they do nothing defensively. I guess, who's 24? AJ Terrell's okay. Richie Grant, I haven't really noticed much from him, to be honest. But they have no talent in the secondary. And, Deion Jones hasn't been the superstar that he was several years ago. It's so brutal. The mismatch between that defense and the Bucs offense was painful. So that's my first note, is that they're just not going to be able to win games when their defense is this bad. And they are years away from having enough talent on that side of the ball. And then you go to the offense, and it just has not looked like I thought it would. I really thought Matt Ryan was going to hit the ground running, getting back in the Shanahan offense with Arthur Smith, who I really still do consider a great play caller, but I haven't been impressed with their rhythm and cadence to their offense, really. They're doing a good job with Cordero Patterson. I've been impressed. They're kind of using him as part receiver, part Derrick Henry, and he's been really impressive. That's been fun to watch, is Cordero Patterson. But they're underutilizing Kyle Pitts, and that's what's really pissing me off. Because, okay, you pass on a Justin Fields, who's a great scheme fit, to take a tight end. and then you go and trade away Julio Jones, and you say, okay, Kyle Pitts is going to replace Julio Jones. And there's plenty of time to still get Kyle Pitts going. But he is not getting used nearly enough, and they're not getting creative with him. When they use him, he looks outstanding. But that's just been very frustrating to me, is if you're going to pass on a quarterback at 4 and reinvest in Matt Ryan, who just looks kind of stale at this point, like he's still a good decision maker and accurate and all this stuff, but he's not pushing the ball downfield. He's not an athletic guy. He's 36 years old. Like, if the idea here was, okay, Matt Ryan can win us a Super Bowl before he retires, they're doing such a bad job of executing that plan, trading away Julio Jones, having no defense in front of him. Oh, and by the way, the offensive line has been a complete disaster. Like, it might be the worst offensive line in the NFL. Unfortunately, Jalen Mayfield is really struggling at guard. It's been bad, man. Real bad. All around, I ended up ranking the Falcons, I think, 28th in my deep dive series. Some people thought that was too low, and I cannot be any happier that I was about as low as I could be on the Falcons, because they could be looking at a top 3 pick next year. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's going to be a quarterback prospect as good as Justin Fields, in next year's draft. And it's a great reminder. We have all these conversations like, we don't need to take a quarterback this year, we'll take one next year. There's never a guarantee that there's going to be that guy. And even if Justin Fields was the 3rd or 4th best quarterback in this class, he still probably would have been the best prospect in this class, like by far. I don't see anybody coming through the woodworks to pass up Fields. There's a lot of football left, but that's the way it's looking right now. So if the Falcons end up with a 3rd or 4th pick, maybe they take Derek Stingley and helps their defense, I suppose, but they're still probably going to be in a predicament with their quarterback situation as Matt Ryan continues to get older. So I am selling the Atlanta Falcons regime right now. I've been really unimpressed. I like Arthur Smith, I really do, but I don't get where they are and where they're going. It just, none of it really makes a lot of sense in Atlanta right now, and I'm selling that organization as a whole at the moment. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we are going to get into the Patreon mailbag. So we'll see you in a second. And lastly, here we are going to open up a big old bag of mail. I want to remind you guys that this show is brought to you by my Patreon. That is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you will get the ultimate triple threat. You can support this podcast, this show, everything I do on this channel would literally not exist without my Patreon. So thank you for supporting the show, whether you're considering it or have signed up recently. But you'll also get exclusive content. Just put up my weekly picks predictions on Patreon yesterday. My Panthers prediction was 24-13. It was 24-9. Told people to bet the under on the Texans score at 16.5. So a good start this week. And then lastly, you will get access to this mailbag where you can slide into my DMs. You can ask me anything, but especially Patreon mailbag questions. And we've got a lot of great questions this week, really carrying the content load this week as I try to catch up on games, really helping this show go. So thank you so much to my patrons. And a lot of you guys have signed up looking for these weekly picks. Like, seriously, thank you so much. It blows my mind how excited you guys are for the Patreon this year. I can't even do enough shout-outs, but I'm just going to shout out the $10 MVP tier pledges, but lots of star tier guys, and thank you if you signed up as a star patron this week. But we've got, let's see here, Bobby Stevens, Luke Whiteside, you were $5. You get a shout-out. We've got, let's see, Zane King Williamson, thank you so much. We've got Marcus Bryson. We've got Rich coming in for a MVP sub. Ashbro Mace has signed up for a full year of star patron. Thank you, Ashbro. Nate pledging looks like an MVP tier for the whole season. Thank you so much, Nate. Wyatt as well. And Scott Nance. I think we're getting into last week's shout out. And John LaDuca Twitch gang, what's up, John? So many more that I need to thank as well. But again, patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. Let's get into the mailbag without further ado. So this one is from Adam. Who do you see becoming a legit Super Bowl contender first, the New York Giants or the New York Jets, and how many years until that happens? Follow up to the question above. If not Super Bowl contender, then at least a playoff-bound team. Okay. I like splitting those up because if you want to talk about playoff bound, the New York Giants play in the NFC East, and within the next 3 years with a good defense and some talent, like I could see them having a 7 or an 8 win season and getting in as a playoff team. Whereas the Jets, I actually think like they're building something there, but clearly they have a long way to go. I think the defense has shown some nice stuff early on, honestly, for the Jets. I think that's going to come around. I don't know if Carl Lawson's ever going to be able to stay healthy, but they need a secondary, right? They need another pass rusher other than Quinnen Williams. They just don't have a lot of talent on that side of the ball. Got to give a shout out to John Franklin Myers as well. Hopefully they retain him. They have the pieces to build around there. 3 years from now, I think the Jets can have a really good defense. And then offensively, they have really not been what I thought they would be, but they have a quarterback that I really believe in Zach Wilson. And if they can get Mekhi Becton back in a few weeks, get Elijah Moore going a little bit more, get a little bit more creative. I will say it's been a worse start to the Mike LaFleur regime there as the offense coordinator than I thought. So I definitely think the Jets will be Super Bowl contenders before the Giants because I'm really scared for the Giants. And if I was a Giants fan, I'd be terrified that they are going to convince themselves that Daniel Jones is worth a 3 or a 4 year contract extension in the same realms of like when Trubisky kind of convinced the Bears and when Bortles convinced the Jags. I think Jones is better than those players, but he's not that far ahead of those players. And I don't think you're ever going to be a Super Bowl contender when Daniel Jones is your quarterback. You literally need everything to be perfect around him. And even then, he's in the Jared Goff Garoppolo tier where you might get to the Super Bowl and he's still not enough. So that's the thing with the Giants is what happens with the Daniel Jones situation. I've given Dave Gettleman a lot of credit. He is facing a serious opportunity here to look really smart and let Daniel Jones play out his time for the Giants, but don't give him a contract extension. That is really what it comes down to with the Giants. And I've complimented Daniel Jones. I think he's a starting NFL quarterback. But the problem is they spent the 6th overall pick on him, and we've seen it time and time again. Teams convince themselves that he's their guy. They drafted him, therefore they have to pay him massive money. That would be a huge problem for the Giants. Maybe he ends up in a franchise tag, Kirk Cousins type of deal, and they eventually find a better replacement. But they are at a crossroads for the New York Giants. I think the Jets have much more of a groundwork to build up to greatness than the Giants currently do. But I do think the Giants will probably see playoff contention because they'll compete in the NFC East at some point. From Scott Nance, what are your thoughts on the rookie quarterbacks so far? Very, very unimpressed. Obviously, we haven't seen Lance yet. That's not so much a surprise. I was maybe the only person out there that predicted that Jimmy Garoppolo was going to start the majority of this season, if not the whole season. And that seems to be the way things are heading at the moment. So that's not so much a surprise. But, Mac Jones has been about what I thought he would be, just kind of that, take what's there, make smart decisions, very pro-ready type of quarterback. I've been impressed by Mac Jones. He's been the best rookie quarterback, at least the most consistent one. So that's been solid. I gave that pick an A+, and I liked what he brought to the table for them. The other three, Justin Fields, we got to see a little bit of him. I did tweet this out. Let me just find my Justin Fields tweet because I really thought this one out, and I think this is a great thing to just read off my Justin Fields analysis of his first game. After getting through Fields' debut, I think we got the full Justin Fields experience, which at this point is a good, the bad, and the ugly experience. The good stuff is 100% there. Beautiful ball placement to every level, pocket presence, and his mobility. his pocket presence and ability to sense pressure and get out when he needs to, that's been the biggest thumbs up for Fields that's going to help him moving forward. There is bad in there that you'd say about almost any rookie quarterback, such as inaccuracy and poor timing on throws, which is something that's really held Trevor Lawrence back as well, and Zach Wilson, and holding onto the ball too long. And then there were a couple ugly plays that led to turnovers. So he had a strip sack fumble where he's holding the ball a little bit too long, and then he had the interception that kind of gave the Bengals a chance to get back in the game. They were running that kind of clear out. The Bears did this constantly with Trubisky, and it's very common for teams to do this with young quarterbacks, where it's trips to one side, you're going 3 verticals with those trips, and then you are bringing a crosser underneath. So the hope is you get cover 3 or you get quarters, and the whole side of the field clears out from those verticals, and then you can sneak some speed over the side on a crosser or a slant. Very easy read. It's almost in some ways like a screen. And they did that a ton with Trubisky. Everyone knows the Bears like to do that. So in that situation, it's late in the game and third and medium. The Bengals see trips left. What they do is they basically trap Justin Fields. They clear out that side of the field, but they dropped, I don't remember who the player was, but they dropped either a blitzing line, I think it was a blitzing linebacker. It might have been Logan Wilson or Jermaine Pratt or someone, but they showed blitz with a linebacker, had him basically go up to the line of scrimmage, shove off the guard, and drop back and wait for that crossing route to come. It was very predictable by Matt Nagy, but it's also a very simple design from the Bears, and Fields just doesn't really see the linebacker dropping off. So now he'll know that that's coming, but definitely kind of a poor read and decision from Fields. You're not panicking about it, but I'm just saying that there was some turnover-worthy stuff in there, and there has been going through his preseason as well. So there's a lot of good. There's your typical kind of bad rookie quarterbacking stuff, and then there's some ugly in there as well. So that's my analysis of Justin Fields. There was one last tag on there on that tweet where it said, playing in a less than ideal circumstance. Ultimately, I saw more good than bad, and only time will tell if playing in a less than ideal circumstance will accentuate his bad tendencies, as we've seen work against other young quarterbacks, or if he has the mental toughness to not let his inevitable mistakes get him down. So I think he will make mistakes. It's just a matter of, do they drag him down, like what happened with Trubisky and Bortles, or perhaps in the case of like a Sam Darnold, can he have the mental toughness to not let those things become a consistent part of his game? As for Zach Wilson, I'm not going to lie, man. I haven't gotten to the Jets-Patriots game. I thought he looked really good in week 1. He had some really big drives to keep them in that game. I will get to the game before Sunday. I just haven't had enough time, and I've been putting that one off because I know it's going to be ugly, and I know that there's a lot of bad to say about Zach Wilson. From the sounds of it, just looks like hero ball, bad decisions, just all around bad. So that's obviously disappointing. And then Trevor Lawrence also, we talked about him a little bit earlier. I think the Jags are doing a terrible job making things easier on him. They're basically plugging him in and asking him to play like a 5-year vet and make great decisions on traditional passing concepts. You want to simplify things. Give him a running game, too. They're not running the ball well. But he's also made mistakes. So it's really been an underwhelming start for the rookie quarterbacks. But it's only week 2. We're gonna see a lot more from these rookies, and I've kind of held off on offering too much stance on any of them because there's a lot of football left for these guys to learn. From Nicholas Craig, where would you rank the Lions defense in 2020 if Jalen Ramsey was their number 1 corner? That's an almost impossible question to answer, but it's an interesting question. I don't think it changes that much. They're probably not the worst defense. Like, they're probably not a bottom 5 defense. It gives you a matchup, a matchup piece to take away guys like, Devontae Adams or Justin Jefferson or whoever in that division, Allen Robinson. It would help the coverage for sure, but I still don't love their pass rush. It was fine last year. They're probably a 20th ranked defense as opposed to whatever 25th or 26th they were. But he doesn't, I don't think a single corner can just dramatically change a defense. They still had a lot of bad corners out there. That was my Gatorade bottle for the audio listeners. I don't know how that's going to come off on the mic, but that's empty. So from Devontae Rivera, I fully expect Aaron Rodgers to come back and be an MVP candidate this year and make the playoffs. So this came in after the Monday Night Football game, but it's an interesting question, so I wanted to include it. If he does end up playing like this, or if he goes back to playing like he did week 1 against better defenses, how many games would it take for Jordan Love to be the starter? Then, of course, Rodgers would go to the Vikings and Jets and make a championship game before retiring. I want to see him in Denver, man. That'd be nasty. But I don't think Rodgers would get benched until they were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. So it probably would be, week 14, week 15. It seems almost impossibly unlikely at this point after they did bounce back on Monday Night Football. But if he's playing poorly, no, I don't think they bench Rodgers really until they were out of playoff contention, because it's Aaron Rodgers. Even if he's playing bad, at some point he could heat up, and then if you could get into the playoffs, you would rather Aaron Rodgers be your quarterback than Jordan Love, even if he's playing like crap. From REA Beats, wanted to know if you think Saquon and the Giants' run blocking looked better this week. Were there any improvements as he comes back from his ACL? If there were, I didn't see them. I think Saquon needs to get out of the Giants and is on course to being one of the most wasted elite talents in the history of the league. From Tomsky, on the first touchdown by the Lions against the Packers, there was a blown coverage by Eric Stokes and Kevin King on a pick play by the Lions. I know exactly what play you're talking about. Everyone seems to be sure that it was King's fault. How can you tell those whose fault it was on that? Do you agree that it was King's fault? And then he also asks, how did you like putting Kevin King in the slot later in the game? So I'm glad we got a Kevin King question in here, because for those that listen to other podcasts, there's a lot of Kevin King discussion going on right now, because I think he has become the single biggest mystery in the NFL as far as not just why is he starting for the Packers, but why is he even on an NFL team? Because especially amidst playoff contenders, there is not a bigger black hole, red flag, easy target liability player on the field than Kevin King right now, who he single-handedly cost the Packers a trip to the Super Bowl last year and has been just as bad to start next year. Meanwhile, Brian Gutekunst gave him a $6 million contract with cap penalties that carry into 2025. So that is one of the biggest mysteries in the league, because his tape is just atrocious. He looks, I kid you not, like how insert any college cornerback at any level would look. Like, he's slow, his technique's terrible, he can't find the ball, he's grabby, you name it. He's terrible. So I'm glad we got a Kevin King question. But this is about a specific play down in the red zone, and the Green Bay Packers were running what you pretty much call cover red zone, where you're dropping probably, six or seven, depends, guys into a spot, and it just almost immediately turns into match coverage. It's basically man, but because of all of the ways offenses try to get creative down there, you got to communicate and pass off different slants and different crosses and different stuff. So it's a zone man, red zone specific defense, and it was one of the most simple concepts you could possibly draw up by the Lions. You have two split receivers on the outside with it was King in the slot and Stokes on the outside, and they're running a slant and an out, and the corners need to communicate that, because you can't. They're basically hoping these corners run into each other and one of those guys comes open. It's like one of the most common red zone concepts. You've all seen it. And this is basic red zone defense. And you have Kevin King, who just really doesn't have a good understanding of the game. And you have Eric Stokes, who was a raw rookie corner who just, he should know how to defend this. But that was really my criticism of Eric Stokes, is that he's raw. He doesn't have the best zone IQ and all this stuff. And that's exactly what we saw. So as far as whose fault this is, I would really split it up. I think it's Eric Stokes' fault for not knowing that you have to trade that off. And it's not, I can't know what, I wish I knew how they coach up that play. But I should have started with saying that Joe Barry is first at fault, because that's that should be day one insert red zone defense. You got 2-on-2 on the outside. If they run a slant and a flat, you pass it off, or you stick with your guy. They should have rules in place for those most basic concepts. So to start with, it's Joe Barry's fault. Either it was their rules are bad, or his coaching of the rules were bad. So it starts there. But then it goes to, Stokes should know what he's supposed to do, and Kevin King definitely should know what he's doing. But also Kevin King should communicate those things better. He should probably, if the idea of bringing Kevin King back is he's a great locker room presence, he's a good mentor for the young kids, that's awesome. But when you're in those situations, I want to see Kevin King before the line of scrimmage saying, talking with Stokes how they're going to play this thing. And there was none of that on this play. So it's really just all around just a mess for the Green Bay Packers. I would probably just put it on Joe Barry, because that should be a day one insert thing. Those players should know what they're doing. You should have rules in place for those. But it could just be a blown assignment. I don't know exactly, if they were for sure supposed to pass it off, or if they do want them to cross. So you can't really know exactly whose fault it is. I wouldn't say it's Kevin King's fault exclusively, but he is part of the blame on that play. And then you also ask, how did I like them putting Kevin King in the slot later in the game? He's certainly a better slot corner than a perimeter corner, because he can't give up these game-changing 50-yard touchdowns from the slot. He's much more of a linebacker safety slot corner, where if he's getting beat, at least it's not, devastating your defense. I still don't think he's a good slot corner. In theory, he has quickness, right? He got drafted off of having rare 3-cone, 20-yard shuttle splits. That certainly has not shown on the outside. I at least like them taking him off the perimeter. Is he better than Chandon Sullivan? I don't know. Neither of those guys are all that good. I do think it's ultimately better for the Packers defense that he loses the outside corner job. But again, I can't believe he got re-signed, let alone hasn't been cut yet. He's just atrocious. Okay, that's enough Kevin King talk. From Josh, I know you're going to be picking up studs and duds next week, but what are your thoughts on Quintez Cephas this season? Is he filling into the Galladay role well? I love Quintez Cephas. He's been exactly what I thought he was coming out of Wisconsin. Not a burner, doesn't create a lot of separation, but if you are in a tough spot, just throw the ball to him with leverage away from his defender, and he has outstanding body control, some of the best hands. I think I tweeted after week 1 that if you told me Quintez Cephas has top 5 ball skills in the NFL, I wouldn't argue with you. I'm not saying he does, but this dude catches everything. He did it Wisconsin. It's very like James Jones, Marvin Jones-esque. I would say he's filling into the Marvin Jones role more than Galladay's role, because Galladay was more of a do-it-all number one receiver, a little bit more vertical speed. But Marvin Jones was always that guy for Stafford, too, of just I'm in a pinch, I'm going to throw it with leverage, and you're going to go make a play. So I think that's a better comp. That was my comp for Quintez Cephas coming out. But I just lost a bid for Quintez Cephas in a Dynasty League. I like him a lot. From Will Smithy, as a Dolphins fan, I'm starting to lose my mind thinking about this O-line. How much do you think someone like Penei Sewell could have helped this O-line, given almost no one is performing well? I do think they'd be better with Sewell. Now, this is assuming Will Fuller could actually get on the field for them, because if Will Fuller never plays, the Jalen Waddle pick makes a little bit more sense. But, I mean, the offensive line is the biggest problem for the Miami Dolphins, even more than Tua. And Penei Sewell looks really good. they had faith in Austin Jackson. That's probably why they convinced themselves not to take Penei Sewell, and that seems to have been a terrible mistake. He looks like one of the worst left tackles in football. So I think he would help the O-line, but they also need pretty much every other spot. So at some point they need to find studs on the O-line. But I don't think taking Penei Sewell alone would have saved it either. I think if you get Penei Sewell and paid a Joe Tooney in free agency instead of I don't know. But there was better ways to improve the O-line than they've done. I think that's very clear. From Luke, I'm curious if I'm the only person in the world that has seen Derek Carr play bad for the first 3 quarters of both his games and then turn into Superman in the fourth quarter. I would say week 1, I agree. He struggled early on and then something clicked in. But I don't think against the Steelers he was really necessarily bad. He certainly turned it on late in the game, which is good to see. But no, I don't think it's really worth criticizing Carr for playing poorly early. It was the first 2 weeks of the first 2 quarters of the season against the Ravens defense, and then I thought he played really well against the Steelers. So I get it, but I wouldn't personally say that. No. From Ash, opinion on Jamie Collins being on the trade block. Is it too soon to look to trade away a starter, or is it a good thing? Any prediction of where he ends up? Many thanks from England. Cheers. I think in the Lions case, it's totally fine. Jamie Collins was from a previous regime. If you don't think his leadership or contribution to your defense is helping, see if you can get something for him. I think it's good process for Detroit in that situation. Excuse me. As far as where he ends up, hybrid outside linebacker type. Giants maybe would make sense. I could see maybe the Rams, maybe not, depending if they want him at edge. Let's see here. Who else would make sense there? I'm just kind of going through all the teams in my head. No one in the AFC South, AFC East, Bills. Patriots, they have so many guys at that position. I don't think they really need to do that. I wouldn't rule it out, but Dolphins, potentially. They haven't been using their what's his name? Their first round pick, Phillips, right? I can't think of his name, but they haven't been using him too much. So maybe opposite of Van Ginkel, you go with Jamie Collins. Might be a good landing spot there. NFC, Bucks, no. Saints, no. There's not a lot of great landing spots for him, really, when you run through everything. So, Dolphins would probably be the front runner for me, but I don't know. From Lions, thoughts on Goff so far? I see a lot of people giving him praise, but so far I think he's just looked okay. Our offense clearly runs through our run game. Yeah, I think that's all because people literally thought Jared Goff was trash, and this goes back to before last year. Jared Goff has never been trash. He's been the 20th best quarterback, and I think he's playing about the 20th best quarterback. So I think the public perception on Jared Goff just dipped a little bit too low, and now it's oh yeah, he's actually, he's a starting caliber player. He wasn't just a throw-in in the Stafford trade. He's a player, so he's been a starting caliber quarterback. He's got a really strong arm. He never gets enough credit for how good his arm talent is. He can read defenses. He's been okay. I don't think he's the quarterback of the future, but he gives them a nice baseline, and it helps them stay competitive. From Matthew, if the Seahawks season falls apart but Shane Waldron's offense is explosive, should they consider moving off Pete Carroll and make Shane Waldron the head coach? 10,000 times yes. I think if the Seahawks can't get it done this year, it's just time to move on from Pete Carroll. Put him in the Ring of Honor, have him resign, don't fire him, all this stuff. But yeah, I've been impressed by the Shane Waldron Seahawks offense. So I like the idea of making him the new head coach 100%. From Josh, what's your opinion on the new head coaches in the NFL? Where do you think Joe Brady ends up next year? Well, we did that. We've got Joe Brady going to the Bengals next year, making a ton of sense with Joe Burrow. We talked about Robert Saleh earlier. I think their defenses looked good. We've talked about Urban Meyer. That's been a disaster. I don't think he makes it to 2022. We've got Brandon Staley we haven't talked a whole lot about, so we can talk about the Chargers. Honestly, it's looked about like I've expected. There's been some hiccups there. There's been some lack of discipline, some mistakes, which just can't seem to elude the Chargers no matter who their head coach is. So that's a little bit disappointing, but for the most part, I think their defense has really clicked in early. I love how they use Derwin James, Asante Samuel. They're doing a good job with Bosa. I think we talked about this on the podcast last week, where I love that they're not forcing Joey Bosa into like a full-time outside linebacker role. He's still playing a lot of his snaps with his hand in the dirt, where he's a guy that really leans on that get off and playing with that first step leverage. And it's just harder to do as a 2-point stance outside linebacker. So I love that Brandon Staley's warping his scheme to his players. Offensively, I think they've looked pretty good, and again, have just made some costly mistakes. So I think Staley's off to a good start. Everything is looking peachy for the Chargers for the most part. Who are we missing? The Falcons. We talked about Arthur Smith. That's been a bit disappointing. I don't know how much is on Arthur Smith and how much is just organizational direction and philosophy. Joe Coley's been fun. Coley. At some point, I'll get that straight. But he's been fun for the Texans. I think he's doing about as good of a job as you could possibly ask. They're staying competitive. They're playing tough. It puts them in a situation where they can find out who on defense and who on both sides of the ball really can be a part of that rebuild is really all you could ask, and become a more appealing place for future coaches and players and all this stuff. So he's done about as good of a job as you could possibly ask for. And then Sirianni for the Eagles has been a little better than expected. I don't know. I don't love their offensive identity. I think they're still learning a lot about themselves. We just don't know a lot about Sirianni. I think their defense has been great, so that's been good. But yeah, that's kind of the initial report card on the new quarterbacks. From Keegan, what rookies have impressed you so far this season, and who's been a little disappointing? Impressed rookies, the corners have been really good. I think Patrick Surtain's been awesome. Asante Samuel Jr. has been awesome. Eric Stokes has been pretty good, other than the blown coverage, if you want to put that on him. So the corners have been really good. Javon Holland, we've ripped on the Dolphins, but Javon Holland's been really, really a nice addition to that secondary. There hasn't been a ton of rookies that have popped. The receivers have been a little disappointing. Waddle, Chase. Who was the other one in that mix? Wasn't there? Devonta Smith's been pretty good. So I guess I would say I wouldn't say Chase has been disappointing. I take that back. He just hasn't been God mode really. I just think relative to how the receivers hit the ground running last year, it hasn't been that. So that's pretty high standards. Then disappointing, I mean, it's tough. It's so early. I never want to bag on these guys. I think Jalen Phillips has been a little disappointing. Was supposed to be this kind of day one impact as a pass rusher. Yeah, I think I need a little more information. For the rookies, it's too early for that one. We'll definitely, once we get into studs and duds, be talking a lot of these young rookies and stuff. So sorry to kind of beat around the bush on that one. Could have maybe rehearsed a list a little better for you, but we'll get plenty more rookie talk as we get into these next few weeks. From Tyler, if you had to create a starting offensive players you think would be great to chill and grab a beer with, who would start? Quarterback, I actually might go Dak Prescott. I think he just looks like such a good dude. I would love to just chill with him. Running back Jamal Williams of the Detroit Lions is like one of the funniest characters in the league. Receiver's tough. A lot of those guys are interesting personalities. AJ Brown seems kind of cool. Larry Fitzgerald might be my answer on that one, even though he's not currently in the league. Tight end, gotta be. Tight end's tough because all those guys, Kittle, Kelsey, and Gronk, all seem dope. I think my favorite personality out of those three might be Kelsey, even though they're all super fun. Offensive line. Who's Wyatt Teller. Wyatt Teller would be the offensive lineman group there. So we've got Dak Prescott, Jamal Williams, Larry Fitzgerald, Wyatt Teller, and Travis Kelce. Love it. Great question. I like it. Jake Gadian asks, do you think the Chiefs' run D is actually this terrible, or maybe just a product of playing the Browns and the Ravens? I think it's a good combination of both. I mean, those are maybe the two best run games in the entire NFL. He also asked, what do you think of Chris Jones at edge so far? He really struggled with the read option against the Ravens. I don't think they did a good enough job to protect him. And I think that was a big part of Lamar's success, was just he had so much more speed to the edge against Chris Jones. I think as a pass rusher, he's been himself. I would say he hasn't been better on the edge than he was on the inside, but he hasn't. I wouldn't say he's been necessarily worse. So I think the Chiefs' run defense is not great, but it's also like you are playing two elite run defenses. So maybe you're a little worried about it if you have to go against those teams again in the playoffs. You got to patch some things up, but I don't think it's going to like consistently hold them back all year either. All right, Connor writes in. We got a little Rodgers Brady GOAT talk here. I've said before that Brady's the most accomplished QB ever and Rodgers is the greatest as he's the most talented and because Rodgers has played at the highest level. Most people, though, use the term greatest to mean what you've accomplished and use the term best to mean most talented instead. If Brady has accomplished the most of any QB without being the most talented, do you think he's also the hardest working quarterback ever? And with him playing at such a high level at age 44, do I think he will win MVP if he keeps it up? Take care and enjoy your wedding. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, it's such a subjective debate as opposed to most accomplished, greatest, best, whatever. Personally, I think to be the greatest at anything means you also have to be the best at it, and I don't think I don't think Brady is the best quarterback ever. He's had sustainability as a top-end, elite quarterback for a long time. He's one of the best quarterbacks ever. I certainly don't think he's definitively the best quarterback to ever play. So if people want to say greatest means accomplishments, then that's your prerogative. I understand why people call Brady the GOAT. Personally, as someone that's a talent evaluator and a scout, I'm not going to call a quarterback that I don't think is the best quarterback to ever play the greatest quarterback to ever play, if that makes sense. That's why I just say he's the most accomplished quarterback ever. So that's, I guess, clarity on that. But Brady has accomplished the most. Is he the hardest working quarterback ever? I think that's fair to say. I think Brady's desire to win, his willingness to take pay cuts, his intuition to leave the Patriots and go to the Bucs, to that was such a, I guess, entrepreneurial, the foresight it took to write in a clause that he can't be franchise tagged and go somewhere where he can be in the best position to succeed. That all plays into his greatness, right? He probably doesn't win another Super Bowl in New England for a long time. They're still building up a Super Bowl caliber team in New England. But he went to a team that, a lot of people like to say, they weren't even a playoff team. Then Brady showed up. No, they were a dominant football team that was still getting better, that just needed a great quarterback to be a Super Bowl team. And you can joke about Brady overrated. You can talk Brady versus Rodgers. Like, at the end of the day, Brady's like, he's a dominant quarterback that I would even say I had taken him out of the elite conversation. He's looking even better than last year. I might be comfortable putting him back into that elite group at this point. So, like, yeah, you put him on that team and you're a Super Bowl team. So the foresight to go and make that move, like, his work ethic and just knowledge of the game and desire to win is unparalleled. So if that's a part of your greatest quarterback of all time debate, I also think that's totally fair. I've reached a point where I'm kind of done like debating this thing and arguing this thing. I think whether you want to look at eye test or scouting perspective or stats or whatever you need to look at, Brady's not the best quarterback to ever play. He's up there. He's maybe second or third. I think him and Peyton. Maybe you look at like Elway, Marino, Montana. Like, there's other players that can get into that conversation. I think Mahomes is certainly entering that conversation as well. I certainly don't think Brady is definitively the best quarterback to ever play. But yeah, if your definition of greatness is desire to win and doing whatever it takes to win, then sure, like, it's clearly worked for him. He's also had incredible defenses and, for the most part, amazing teams around him. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. All right, we got a couple more here from the Baked Potato. How worried are you about the Steelers? They obviously underperformed against the Raiders. I'm not worried about the D, as half of our starters were out by the end of the game. However, our O was atrocious again. Can they come together? I am worried about the Steelers, because the offense, and Big Ben looks like a quarterback that probably should have retired. I don't think the modern NFL is built for Ben Roethlisberger at 39 years old or whatever he is, because clearly he doesn't have command of his deep ball. He can't extend plays like it used to. And he's never been like this surgeon of a passer. He's a good decision maker. He's got a good processor, but it's not like late career Drew Brees. It's not like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, where like he can pick defenses apart. That's not really Ben Roethlisberger. He's a smart player, but he's not at that elite level. So if he doesn't have the physical traits to lean on, you're left with, I don't know, Teddy Bridgewater, like Case Keenum. Where is Ben Roethlisberger right now? I think he's in that like 25 to 35 range, and that's not good enough. You're going to end up with pretty bad offensive games a lot of the time, especially with the bad offensive line when that's your quarterback. So I'm very worried about that. Defensively, I'm not worried at all. I think the secondary has some issues, but that pass rush is the best in the NFL. So I think the Steelers will still be in the mix for the playoffs. You got a big win against Buffalo week 1, but it's going to be really tough for them to be a Super Bowl team, and I guess we'll just find out what life after Big Ben looks like, because I will be stunned if Big Ben is back for another year in Pittsburgh. From Miguel, do I think the Broncos can keep up this early success? I don't think they go undefeated, right? They haven't lost a game yet. They've had a really easy schedule. They should beat the Jets this week. I think that they can be in the mix for like a 10-win wild card season. I think eventually you will see the limitations of Teddy Bridgewater show up, and that's really what it comes down to. I love this defense. Von Miller's been playing like his old self. Patrick Surtain looking like a monster out there. This defense can really be one of the best in the league, and I do think this is a team that will beat up on bad teams just as they've done, and will keep games close against the good teams, but you're asking Teddy Bridgewater to go head-to-head with Herbert and Mahomes and Carr looking like he's playing, and Josh Allen and all these great explosive offenses. Eventually that's going to keep up with you, but this has been pretty much the best case scenario for the Broncos. Is Von Miller looks healthy, the defense looks as good as it has, and then offensively, Teddy Bridgewater just keeps the ship afloat. And that's a formula that we've seen in Denver produce like a Super Bowl team, right? You know, I don't know if they'll be the 2014 Broncos that was one of the best defenses of the last 20 years, but it can be a really good defense and maybe even a better offense. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team, but yeah, I think they can absolutely be a playoff wildcard team that could maybe win a playoff game, which is probably better than you expected for the Denver Broncos. So that is the mailbag and the conclusion of our show. Thank you so much for watching. It's good to be back. I'm going to hopefully get some film room stuff up on Patreon here tomorrow, and then we'll be back with our regular schedule. We'll probably be doing power rankings on Mondays now. We'll see about that. You guys let me know kind of if that would destroy my power rankings. If I didn't include Monday Night Football, just let me know there. Podcast will be next Wednesday at 3:30 Central, 4:30 Eastern. And yeah, we'll be back to the regular scheduled content starting next week. I appreciate you guys for listening. Enjoy week 3 action. I certainly will. And we'll see you later. Peace out.